Good morning. Wait, check this out. Hold on. Look what I got. Blue lock blanket. Check this out too. Him. It's no secret that Timmy's favorite role is that of the all-rounder role. We know this. They're super versatile Pokemon that do pretty much everything, and many of them fit into multiple roles. It's like the developers slap all-rounder onto literally anything that could potentially be an all-rounder, and they assume that people like to play them, so they make everything into an all-rounder. But according to my previous analysis, people actually prefer to play attacker, so stop making all-rounders, please. Can you tell I'm an all-rounder hater? Hi, by the way, my name is Husky, and today we're biblically accurate Husky because I'm wearing dog ears instead of cat ears. So let's jump back into our series where we're dissecting the real roles of every Pokemon in Pokemon Unite. Today's episode is going to be all-rounders, and there are a lot of them, so bear with me. According to the Pokemon Unite website, all-rounders are Pokemon that have balanced offense and endurance and are highly tenacious fighters. Tenacious? Tenacious? Tenacious. Based on this description, all-rounders could be literally anything. They're both damage dealers and sustainers. They aren't limited to being ranged or melee. They're not limited to having more bursts or having more autos, having shred or secure. This is truly just a catch-all role that Timmy gets to design whatever broken thing they want and throw it in as an all-rounder. All-rounders in Unite are quite literally anything they want. They can jungle, they can top lane, they can bot lane, they can invade, they can even defend or support in some cases. So it's hard to even narrow them down into what all-rounders are supposed to do because they can do anything. I think at the beginning of the game, all-rounders were placed in this game as a frontline damage dealer, excelling in 1v1s, and having just enough CC to isolate opponents. But they have turned into so much more than that. Let's talk about it with our list. So here is the all-rounders on our chart. The main sub-role that all-rounders fit into focuses on how they use their moves, either mainly auto attacks or moves. I feel like designating all-rounders this way just kind of proves that they truly can do anything, because attackers can also be designated like this, but they also have specifications that make them fit into the attacker role. I don't know, do I sound like an all-rounder hater? I kind of am. For items here, this is one of the most versatile classes in the game, and it really is Pokemon to Pokemon based, but stacking an attack weight is usually a really strong call. You can also build auto all-rounders with an auto attack focus build, so like Muscle Band, Rapid Fire, Scarf, Scope Lens, things like that. Since all these Pokemon are attack-based, not special attack, any attack items really can work on this Pokemon, and even defensive items can be a good call. Again, they're all-rounders, so they're very versatile. For emblems, all-rounders are usually going to be the 6 brown, 6 white build. There's not really much deviation that you can do from this build right now. The next sub-role is the Brawler. Brawlers were discussed in the previous video when we talked about defenders, but on the all-rounder side, these are Pokemon that are built mainly as frontliners who can do a bit of extra damage. They usually have a bit of CC, so they can play the role of defender a little better, but they generally are focused mostly on frontline damage. For items, these characters should be running an attack weight, and to lean into this role, they can run at least one defensive item, like Resonant Guard or Focus Band. But again, these characters can really do anything, so you can run pretty much any attack-based item. For emblems, 6 brown, 6 white. Come on, guys, keep up. Next, the Enablers. So Enabler was talked about in our support video as well, but this is a really interesting role because these are all-rounders that have a really unique build focused around CC and setting up their team rather than doing the damage themselves. These are Pokemon that can run EXP share in these niche cases, but it's still, using an attack weight and attack-based items is also a strong bet, along with potentially a defensive item or two. The argument for Float Stone is also a bit stronger here. Emblems, come on, guys. You know this one. Next, we have the Ranged All-Rounder. So Ranged All-Rounders connect All-Rounders to attackers. It's where Pokemon have ranged builds where they can stand back out of the way instead of diving right into the mix. They're not necessarily squishier, but they have a bit more range to keep them healthy and allow them to poke from a distance. Items for these Pokemon can evolve in attack weight, but with range damage, they can usually work really well with a Muscle Band. Again, All-Rounders are versatile. They can run most attack-based items. 6 brown, 6 white. Finally, we have the Divers, the role that connects all-rounders to speedsters. These Pokemon are often focused a bit more on burst damage and jumping into the enemy backline to target squishy attackers, much like how speedsters work. They usually have moves that have the ability to isolate opponents, they have a lot of mobility, and they are a bit tankier so they can sustain longer. For items, again, you can't really go wrong with an attack weight, but the items don't necessarily differ from the other suggestions that I have so far. And the same goes for the emblems. Now let's talk in depth about our 19 all-rounders currently in the game. Mewtwo X. I still feel cringe about Mewtwo. Mewtwo X is categorized as an auto-focused all-rounder. It has a great chase and isolation capabilities and traumatized much of the community. I think this Pokemon should also be placed under Brawler because I've seen quite a lot of people exploring a bit more an ethical build on this Pokemon and running an EXP share potion, something like that. Hopefully removing the EX classification makes this thing less stupid, but I think many of us just ignore this Pokemon because of what it did to us mentally. Garchomp was our original auto-attack all-rounder. It has combos that isolate enemies and is created to shred enemies' objectives and farm. It's not used for anything else besides being a shredder. It's an A presser until it's KO'd. It respawns simply to continue pressing the A button. Its moves exist as a method to allow it to press the A button as soon as possible. Dragonite is an all-rounder that has two explicitly different playstyles. Its auto-focus build uses Outrage, where it does pretty much the same thing as Garchomp and shreds as fast as possible before the enemies can get away. Its Hyper Beam build, however, is more attacker-focused, where its goal is to build up its Hyper Beam using auto-attacks and Dragon Dance, and then hit a huge burst of damage from range. It's everything that a ranged all-rounder Subrole suggests with this build. Gyarados, a more recent addition, fulfills a similar role as both an auto-attacker and a ranged all-rounder, depending on its builds. With Dragon Breath, the goal is to hit an opponent and then press A until the end of time, but with Aqua Tail, it can poke from range. There's not much else to say here besides that. It's a very strong Pokemon when it does get online. Our special little sword puppy is a good mix between auto-focused all-rounder and a caster because this thing's moves do just as much ridiculous damage as its autos. It has chase, it has stun, it has crit, it's insane. Good thing it needs Eos energy to be good though, right? Azumarill is my favorite all-rounder to play because it was released way back when you didn't need gems to get Pokemon on release, so it was when I would just get everything and start playing it as soon as it came out. And I am a Whirlpool believer, which is focused more on casting rather than auto attacks, though its auto attacks, as per its passive, are focused on critical hit. Since Aqua Tail is a bit more ranged, it can poke with Water Pulse, it can also be played more of this ranged all-rounder type of Pokemon as well. I think Azumarill's design was supposed to make it focus on its auto attacks, but it turns out its moves are honestly what makes Azumarill usable. Aegislash is a very skill-intensive Pokemon with a balance between offense and defense. Its moves are where this Pokemon lives, making sure it balances its sword stance with its shield stance, and without its moves it doesn't really do much, since its auto attacks aren't very powerful without the boosteds that the moves provide to it. Falinks is a really cool designed Pokemon who the developers just can't seem to figure out how to balance. This thing is a burster who uses its moves to change its formation. I feel like there's not much else to say about Falinks. It has some CC, it has burst, its moves are strong, and it also farms objectives and wild Pokemon pretty well. I would love if this thing became good again, but the developers seem to have forgotten about it. Unlike Falinks, Blaziken has not fallen off and is perhaps one of the most broken Pokemon in the game at the moment. Its entire kit is built off of using its moves and switching between the move styles using its Unite move. It has a good amount of stun, burst, and shred between its movesets and is just all around super broken. All-rounder. Super broken. Who would have thought? Basically the definition of what a caster all-rounder is focused on. Tyranitar is listed here as a brawler. It's very tanky, it has a lot of CC, it lives forever once it gets online, and it brawls super well by standing there and relying on its true damage to skip shields and hope for big critical hits. You can play it as a frontline defender if you want to. It's pretty crazy, but since it's not broken anymore, people seem to forget that it still exists and is really strong. Metagross is also very very much a brawler. It balances its moves to use boosted attacks and gain shields so it doesn't go down. It also has some chase like the other brawlers, and a good amount of mobility and movement speed, and also a powerful Unite move that allows Metagross to focus on keeping the attention on it rather than the squishier Pokemon on its team. So that's kind of where the brawler delineation comes from. Next up is Scizor, a Pokemon that has the opportunity to either be really strong or not very good at all. It has a lot of sustain and frontline, and if not bursted down, it can live for a really long time. But if it's stunned or bursted, it can basically just explode. It's supposed to stand there and brawl, targeting one opponent at a time and trying to chase down highly mobile Pokemon with its Unite move. Buzzwole used to be the ultimate top lane all-rounder, but late game, as it scales up, it loses a lot of viability, making it more reliable in the enabler role. It can isolate singular opponents and hand them over to damage of its allies rather than doing all of the damage itself, but like some of our enabler supports, it still does excel at 1v1s and can definitely hold its own. I hate this thing. One thing about me is I am a Buzzwole hater. Machamp, the most broken Pokemon in the game. Machamp has two distinct builds with different playstyles, with Submission fitting into this enabler role. It picks up opponents and throws them, and gives allies the chance to take it down. It's focused more on its CC than its damage, but it doesn't mean it still can't do a ton of damage on its own. Machamp's arguably better build is its Dynamic Punch build, where it dives in on enemies and bursts them down before they can react, so it dives in harder. Newly buffed Charizard definitely fits the role of the ranged all-rounder, but it can also brawl pretty well and stay alive for a while. It pokes, throwing its moves and auto attacks, and then when the time is right, it'll use its powerful Unite move to take down everyone in its path. Except for your team's Charizard, they'll just immediately engage and go down and also use their Unite move at 230 every single time no matter what. Ceruledge is the newest all-rounder, and a really cool release. Its main draw is its Unite move, but it's built around diving into the backline and doing a ton of damage to the squishy Pokemon and then hopefully getting back out afterwards, making it more similar to a speedster in that regard. Both of Lucario's movesets are focused on diving into the backline, though Power Up Punch is more focused on burst, and Extreme Speed is more focused on mechanically outplaying opponents. For a long time, Lucario reigned as the top laner in the game, though it's still very strong. It has gotten a bit power crept in this category, especially by Pokemon like Ceruledge and Mimikyu. Speaking of Mimikyu, Mimikyu was one of the recent releases in the game that's built more like a speedster than an all-rounder. It hits Pokemon from range with Shadow Sneak and isolates a single opponent either with Play Rough or shreds opponents with Shadow Claw. It has a lot of sustain as well, so it can stay in fights pretty long. Mimikyu's Trick Room build is a little more difficult to categorize because it doesn't exactly dive as hard as Shadow Sneak, but it's hardly ever used, so I'm not really sure exactly what it would be. Maybe it would be a brawler, maybe it would be a caster all-rounder. I'm honestly not sure. Urshifu is categorized here as a diver, but I feel like this works best for the water style build, and with the dark style build it can be used more as a caster with Wicked Blow. But generally, water Urshifu is not affected at all by Flux Zones and has really strong chase. During that time it can shield itself and stay in fights for a long time, or even use its surging strikes to escape when needed. Both movesets are really strong right now, but I think people are still recovering from when this thing was broken and see it in every single game, so it's not used as much as you'd expect for how good it is. Our final all-rounder is the queen herself, Tsareena. With both builds, she's focused on dashing in, isolating opponents, sustaining with its moves, and using its Unite move to completely force an opponent out of the battle. Like many of the all-rounders, Tsareena also had its time being broken, and it's not anymore, but it's still really powerful. Come to think of it, I feel like there's only a few all-rounders who've never had a meta surrounding them. So there you have it. There's our all-rounders and their sub-roles. Let me know what you think, as always. This is the class that I'm least versed in because I'm clearly a hater and I don't have many of them on my roster, so definitely give me your thoughts, argue with me, let me know what your opinions are. And I will see you guys next time. Bye!